Welcome everyone to this episode of the Women in Technology Spotlight. It's great to have you all with us again. Please like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the coming episodes. Today I have with me Margarette Joven. She's an antivirus staff analyst at Fortinet. Welcome, Margarette.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's so great of you to give us your time. Let me kick it off with my first question, which is, as usual, tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, what drives you.
Okay. Well, my name is Margaret, or Marga for short. I was born and raised in the Philippines, and I'm now living in Canada with my husband and two young boys. I'm currently working as an antivirus analyst, as mentioned earlier. And what I enjoy is I enjoy food, whether it's eating or making it. So there are a lot of good restaurants where I live. So I like trying out these different restaurants and different cuisines. And I also enjoy cooking and being with my family, whether it's just to take my kids to soccer or to travel with them or to just simply hang out with them. And recently I started to make birthday cakes just because it's cheaper that way. But I also started to actually decorate them. And yeah, so I'm not a very artistic person growing up. So this was something new for me, but I'm actually enjoying it. So I'm starting really simple things, but the kids love it. So there you go.
I'm totally in awe of people who can decorate cakes. I am completely...
Yeah, me too. So I just do the simple, super simple stuff. But yeah, it takes some patience, but it all works out because the kids love it.
That sounds great. And I think it's also important to have, a certain amount of creativity on the side because, we both work in tech, which is where you're very much in your head, all day. So it's kind of like it balances it out.
Yeah, you're using a different part of your brain, right? So
exactly. Yeah. So coming to your job, so you are an antivirus analyst at Fortinet. What does that mean? What do you do?
Yeah. Not a very common job, I know. So basically what it means is that I analyze viruses. So they originally mentioned viruses, although nowadays they're just called malware to be more precise. But yeah, so basically we get files that we analyze to check for malicious code. And then we also make the signatures that would detect those malicious codes. So if you have your antivirus software that would scan your system, so the scanning takes place by checking certain characteristics or bytes in files against what we call signatures. So those are like the signature of this virus. So this is how we identify which virus or which malware is this file. So that's basically what we do. But also as part of my major role right now is to train new analysts and like new employees that will become AV analysts or have an analyzing role for malware. And so we created this program maybe about 12 years ago. So it's still ongoing. So we've trained a lot of people. Basically, most of my team have been trained by us because we kind of started from the ground up. And so, yeah, so that's mostly my role, and also to make sure that our quality is high. So I am part of making standards that analysts will follow, and I look into our procedures to make sure we're doing things right or how to improve things. So yeah,
that sounds so interesting. So what I understood is what you do is when there's new viruses, you can analyze them and you create new signatures and you make sure that they are found on our computers before they can, wreak havoc there.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Wow, that sounds very technical. And so let me ask you, I mean, one part of it, as you said, is educating and training people, but the whole analysis, that's very technical. So what is your background here?
Yeah. So my degree was in computer science. So I took that for 4 years at a university of the Philippines. And then my first job was more into IT, right? So I started looking for positions with usually programming, because those were the available jobs, right? Mostly the common jobs. And then this opening came up about being, they call it an antivirus engineer. So I thought that sounds interesting. What is it, right? And so it was at a job fair because I've never heard of this before. So I got to talk to the recruiter and they told me all about it. I saw it's about analyzing viruses. So you'll be trained in how to recognize viruses and to know what they were doing to a system. And yeah, part of the job, because we're juniors, you know, they know nobody knows anything about this. So part of the job is training. And so, yeah, so that's kind of made me interested in it. As I said, like, I know nothing about viruses. And, you know, at the time it was just starting. So it was in the late 90s. So just to date myself a little bit. So yeah, like early 2000s. So, you know, people have heard of viruses, but then there's not a lot of security companies out there too. So I thought that was, you know, an emerging field that it's very interesting. So
Yeah,
so I tried out for it. And then from there, it just took off.
That's so interesting because it sounds like you kind of stumbled into cybersecurity.
Yeah,
Right?
I did.
mean, it's not like you had the intention to become an antivirus analyst. And this brings me to my next question, actually. So when you decided to study computer science, what was your vision of what you were going to do afterwards? Or why did you actually choose this field?
I think when did I get started? I think it was high school when I first got into programming. So they introduced coding, and I think it was basic at the time. So it was, like I said, I'm dating myself here.
Yeah, you and me we're both not young.
Exactly. Right? So, and then I found that I was actually, you know, I did pretty well with it, and I apparently have a logical mind because, you know, you have to have these steps when programming. Yeah. And I did really well, and I found it easier than most of my peers I found. So I thought that's interesting. And then I actually enjoyed it because, you know, when the program does what you wanted it to do, it's like, oh, that's great. So it started out with that. I did really well with math as well. So yeah, I got awards for math when in high school, and physics. So science and math were really very interesting for me. And then programming was a bit like, well, it is a lot of math too, but also very logical. So I actually really liked it. And so when it was time to choose, you know, what are you going to take for university? I mean, that seems like, well, it was not my first choice actually, because I wanted to be a veterinarian for like very unrelated, like, because I love animals and thought I could work with them. But, you know, my parents, being the practical people they are, they said, you might not, you know, have a very good job, especially in the Philippines. There is not a lot of opportunities for vets at, you know, it's not like in other countries where there's a lot of people that really look after their pets, like a part of the family, right? So there's not a lot of that where I am, where I was back then. So is that okay? Then what's the next best thing? Although that was like my second choice, like with programming. It's like, but you know, I still enjoyed it actually. So it was more like I liked them both. But so I chose one that made more practical sense, you know, according to my parents. I listened to them. It was wise counsel, I have to admit. And it was not easy too, because, you know, you have to sit down and look at the computer screen for a long time. And, you know, all these long hours in university to finish a project. I mean, a lot of people go through that. And it kind of just also helps you to be sure, like, do you really want this or not? Because, you know, nothing in life is easy, right? So you have to be willing to endure these things, right? If you want to go through with it. So yeah, so I did well with university, even though it was hard. And then that's basically it. So then I got this job in the cybersecurity.
I'm wondering, because you said you came into contact with coding in high school.
Yes.
So, and you enjoyed it, and you were really good at math. But okay, what is my question here really? My question is, how many other girls were, you know, enjoying coding and were good in math when you were at high school?
when I was in high school, there wasn't a lot, to be
Mhm.
honest, right? Although the top honor students were
Mhm.
mostly women. I
Uh-huh.
think it's kind of a stat that, that um because women are very good at maybe sitting down for long periods of time, or girl most, I don't know. But for coding per se and for science, yeah, it wasn't a lot. It wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
And then we even had a team that participated in this kind of like a game show.
Mhm.
So we represented our school, and we were two girls. And so I was in charge of the math. The other was, in charge of everything else, basically. But although I'm free to help out in the trivia stuff, but basically I was the math person. And so
Mhm.
they kind of trained me more in the math. So yeah, to answer your question, not a lot. Not a
Mhm.
lot.
So you were good at coding, you enjoyed it, and you were good at math. Um, but you wanted to become a veterinarian. And I'm wondering,
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm just wondering, is
Yeah.
this because you didn't even really have a clear picture of what you could do with this coding and this math, or was
Yeah,
it because you
I
love
think
animals
so.
more?
I think so. It was just one of those, when you're a kid, it's like one
Mhm.
of the, when you ask what do you want to be when you grow up, it's always the visible
Yeah.
careers, right? Like doctors and teacher maybe, and
Mhm.
things that you see, like coders, you don't really see them as a kid, right?
That is actually one of the reasons I have this podcast, the
Mhm.
whole idea of, bringing people into tech, especially women, is hinged around, them knowing what you can do there, in my opinion,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
for a lot of people, when you tell them come and work in tech, that does not mean anything. It
Mhm.
just, okay, what is this? Some geek sitting around a
Yeah.
computer, and what do they actually do? It doesn't sound interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why I'm so happy when I have women like you who are willing to talk to me and talk about what they do on a daily basis and explain that. Because we very much can only aspire to things that we can, we have a picture in our head
Mhm.
of.
Mhm.
And coming back to that is one of my next questions is, did you have any role models? I mean, what did your parents do, for example? Did they have
Um,
anything to do with tech?
Yeah, well, my mom was more the career woman. So
Mhm.
she was the one working for family. My dad was a stay-at-home dad, so it's a little
Oh,
bit
cool.
reversed from the norm. And so it's a combination of both, because my dad was pretty technical, right? So
Mhm.
he had an engineering background. And so I
Mhm.
think I got that maybe from him. Maybe.
Mhm.
It's hard to
Yeah,
know, right?
maybe. Sure, you never
Yeah.
know, but at least you have someone who understood what you were going to do.
Yeah. And then for the career side is my mom, right? So
Mhm.
working now as a full-time mom. So that was
Mhm.
kind of my picture too. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's a little bit of both. And
Mhm.
then as for like in school, I did have really good teachers. So like I said, we were part of this game show. And so I
Mhm.
was mentored a little bit more. Like I was tutored more
Mhm.
than the other students because they wanted to prepare
Mhm.
for this game show. And then after that too in university, so I had a university instructor in computer science. What was his? He was teaching. He taught two courses that I took.
Mhm.
So it was assembly language, very technical, which
Mhm.
is funny because that's basically what I look at all day, like assembly language. And then the other one was operating systems concepts. And
Mhm.
so we found that we had a pretty good connection. So even now, he's a very close friend of mine. So we're still
Mhm.
keeping in contact. And so, yeah, so he was one of them. It also kind of what brought us together too is that I found out he's a Star Wars fan. So again, a geeky thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
started us talking and
Mhm.
yeah, so yeah, even now we still talk Star Wars. He's my master Yoda.
And I think that's important. You actually do need some mentors in your life who will, help you move forward, especially if it gets maybe a bit more complicated, or you just need some sense of direction and things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, so you went to university to study computer science, and I don't know what it was like in the Philippines, but um, were you one of many women or one of a few? What was it like? Yes.
So the College of Engineering is mostly male, but computer science, there seems to be an equal part of females and males.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? So, but I found even among my friends that I first
Mhm.
met during my first year there, so we're still friends up to now,
Mhm.
but a lot of them actually moved out of computer science after the
Oh,
first year. Yeah. So they
mhm.
just found, it wasn't for them. And that's okay, right? It's
Mhm.
you're finding out what works for you and not. But yeah, but I find engineering, the College of Engineering in general was mostly, yeah,
Mhm.
predominantly male. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the same everywhere, I guess.
Mhm.
And this is something we're trying to change, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So coming to working in tech, when you talk to other women, is this career you've kind of stumbled in? Because I don't want to say chosen, because in the end, they choose computer science, but then you stumbled into cybersecurity and
Yeah.
analyzing viruses. Is that something you would recommend to other women? Do you enjoy this?
Oh yeah. It's very I see the word interesting a lot because that's why I can't find any other word. Yeah, especially if you like solving puzzles. So there is a bit of a difference with coding
Mhm.
and analyzing, because with coding you're making the programs, right? So it's a little bit different. With what we do is more reverse engineering. So
Mhm.
you're taking somebody else's program and trying to figure out what they're doing. And
Yeah.
especially with malware, what makes it more interesting is that they do have tricks that make it very difficult. So it's not like your simple, I don't know,
Mhm.
for loop, for example. They go all over the place, right? Before you figure out, oh, it's just a simple for loop. So that's kind of what makes it interesting. It's challenging as well because it always changes because they get
Mhm.
creative too. So once they figured out that we figured it out, then they kind of try to change things out too. So it's yeah. So if you like solving puzzles and just solving problems in general. And also if
Mhm.
you like looking at code. So that's the other thing, because you'll be looking at code a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you find that very interesting, then yeah, go for it, right? Like this is also very much needed right now. Like with, I know when I started, it was kind of new. Nobody knew that it was going to be this big thing. Like now
Yeah.
it's like you can't be online without thinking about cybersecurity, right? So
That's actually a good point. I mean, it's definitely one of those fields, cybersecurity, even if you're not necessarily an antivirus analyst, but just the whole field of cybersecurity. I think that's something that's become so big and will be
mhm.
big for quite some while, that the opportunities you have here are also quite
Yes.
good. So, right?
Yeah. So we need a lot more people. So
Yes.
all these women, come on, we need you.
Absolutely. So, apart from recommending to go into cybersecurity, what would you tell young women who are, on the, about to choose a career and don't exactly know how to move forward? What would your recommendation be?
Well, it's also find what your interests are, right? Like
Mhm.
that's kind of the first thing. And you try to align it with that. Although sometimes I know practically speaking, maybe your interest will not help pay the bills. Maybe. I mean, just to be practical. I mean, that's
Mhm.
so what something that my mom also said was that you have a job and you do your best, right? But also don't forget your other interests. Like maybe you like to sing, but then you won't be like a famous singer, right? I mean, that's maybe not in the works for you, but then you can do that. You can still do that. Still
Mhm.
have this career and make it as fun as possible. Obviously choose the one that still stimulates you, but also you can still do these other things like decorating cakes. Like I may not be the best, like people may not pay for my cakes, but I'm enjoying it,
Not
right? So
yet. Absolutely. I think that's something we must remember, that it's not just work, even
mhm.
if we don't choose our greatest passion as our work, we might still have time in our,
Mhm.
private life to follow those
Yeah.
passions and just enjoy doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
Not all about work.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm. Yeah, that's actually such a good point. We tend to forget that. And thank you so much. Thank you for telling me your story and coming here on my podcast and giving me your time. It was a great pleasure talking about you and your journey. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
thank you. Thank you for inviting me.